The Patton Report is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Welcome back to the Patton Report. I'm your host, Chris Patton, and today we're connecting the dots across ice, industry, and infiltration. We're starting today with a hockey mystery that has haunted a team for generations. Before catching up on the latest headlines shaping the gaming world, and then we'll head back into 1998 to talk about the promised game, Metal Gear Solid, that we spoke about on the last episode. A game that didn't just redefine stealth, it redefined storytelling itself, was known as a tech demo for the original PlayStation. Many people probably got this on a demo disc from either Pizza Hut or Domino's. It is one of my favorite games of all time. It is what introduced me truly to the series and made me go down the rabbit hole of playing every Metal Gear Solid or Metal Gear game since then, including some of the lesser-known ones. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about hockey. It's what I've been watching. My New Jersey Devils, they're starting out hot. I believe that they are, we'll see, 8-2. 8-2. They've lost only two games this year. They look really solid. They did lose last night to the Avalanche as I'm recording this podcast. But outside of that, they've been really, really strong. And I wanted to do something for Halloween. I thought back to one of our old podcasts, or one of the podcasts I was previously on, called Skates to Throats. We covered this really eerie tale. Kind of a curse. It's not like the Boston Red Sox curse or the Chicago Cubs curse or anything like that. It's more related to a tragic plane accident of a Toronto player that had cursed the team for quite some time, and in some belief that the curse is still around to some extent. So we're going to start there. Let's start where cold air meets colder fate on the frozen legacy of the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that has been cursed. A team that has a lot of trouble in the Stanley Cup playoffs even to this day. But this is going to take us way back into 1951. The Leafs were at the top of their game. Toronto had become the dynasty team of the post-war NHL. The season Stanley Cup final against Montreal Canadiens was a classic. 5 games and 5 overtimes, every matchup decided by the slimmest margin possible. Game 5 on April 21st, 1951. Tied game, sudden death. The crowd in the Maple Leafs garden was on edge. Then in overtime, defenseman Bill Barilko, number 5, crashed the net and scored the cup-winning goal. Toronto wins. The crowd explodes. Barilko is carried off the ice as the Leafs secure their 4th championship in 5 years. There's a great photo of him leaping through the air. It became legend, a moment frozen in time. And then, just a few months later, Barilko vanished. That summer, he joined his friend dentist Henry Hudson on a weekend fishing trip in northern Quebec. They took off in Hudson's small yellow Fairchild float plane and never came back. The aircraft simply disappeared. No distress signal, no wreckage, nothing. And for 11 years, Barilko's fate was a mystery. And for 11 years, the Toronto Maple Leafs couldn't win another Stanley Cup. They came close, they had talent, but something always slipped through their fingers. Fans started whispering that the team was cursed, that they wouldn't hoist another Stanley Cup until Barilko was found. It wasn't just superstition, it was heartbreak turned into folklore. Then in 1962, Toronto finally won again, and just a few weeks later, a helicopter survey team discovered the wreckage of Barilko's plane deep in northern Ontario wilderness near Cochrane. The bodies were still inside, 11 years to the season. The Leafs had their cup, and the curse was supposedly lifted. Now you can look back at this and say, what are the odds? That's the beauty of sports mythology, the way tragedy and triumph intertwine to create something bigger than the stats. Barilko's story became Canadian lore. His number 5 was retired. His name still echoes in the halls of the team's history. Even if you're not a hockey fan, you might have heard it immortalized in the Tragically Hip's 50 Mission Cap, where Gord Downie sings, Bill Barilko disappeared that summer. He was the last goal. He was the last goal he ever scored. There's something powerful about that. A goal, a disappearance, a decade-long drought, and a rediscovery. It's stuff legends are made of to some extent. And the curse didn't stop haunting fans there. Since that 1967 Cup, Their last one, the Leafs have gone 50 plus years without winning another. Some fans joke that the curse just took a nap. Others call it the new curse born out of heartbreaks, bad trades, and Game 7 collapses. But at its core, it's all about belief. It's how humans try to make sense of long droughts, whether in sports, art, or life. We crave narrative, a way to connect events, to give shape to randomness, and sometimes the story becomes just as important as the score. I thought that was a neat little story to start out the show, and one that not a lot of people know about, at least on the American side of hockey fandom, and one that I've been thinking about, like I said, with hockey being spooky and curses about, and the constant news of will this be the year? Will Toronto finally get over that hump, or will the curse itself still be around? Let's see. What else have I been up to? I've been playing Ninja Gaiden 4, and for anyone out there that hasn't played it, it is free on Game Pass. If you have, free is, we'll use free loosely, but it is available on Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, highly recommend you go play it. It is one of the best of these type of games that's come out in a really long time. It can be very difficult depending on what level you're playing at. There is a easy mode available if you just want something very cinematic that has some auto blocking and stuff like that. So if you pick it up and you find it a little too hard, try switching over to that. But yeah, it's great. Really good visuals. I think it's a fun story. Throughout the game. I don't want to give any spoilers because it just came out, but the art style, the way it looks, the way it moves, the way it feels, everything about it has been wonderful. So I'm about 20 hours into the game. I've not finished it yet as of this recording, but I've had an absolute blast with it. I think some of the boss fights are really cinematic looking, whole hell of a lot of fun, and it is, I don't know, man, it might be my game of the year so far out of the things that I've played. So it's one that I highly recommend, and one you should definitely check out. Outside of that, we finished up in the household here, the household of the Patton Report. We finished up Star Trek Voyager, and I will say, someone who had never watched it and kind of avoided it for years and years and years, I'm glad I watched it. The Doctor, as I talked about previously, may be one of my favorite Star Trek characters now. Definitely in the top 5, if not top 3. I think he is one of the greatest characters in that show's history. It's been, and I love the way the show wrapped up. And for those out there that are watching it, I don't want to spoil anything, but moving on from that, we started watching Deep Space Nine. And then I watched a bunch of Stephen King movies for my other podcast, Bachman's Basement. And we watched some of the ones you probably wouldn't think of with Stephen King. I watched The Shining already because it's Halloween, but which is just one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm sure everyone out there listening to this is probably saw that. But I also checked out The Green Mile again, Hearts in Atlantis, both great flicks. Green Mile always makes me want to cry. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece of cinematic art. And and then I just recommend going and checking out the podcast if you haven't heard it, Bachman's Basement. We go over all of our favorite both Stephen King films and Stephen King works, either short stories or books, in a top 10 list for a Halloween special. So check that out. It was a lot of fun. It's kind of a little different than our previous episode, which was The Monkey, which was a lot of fun as well. So I watched, The Monkey and a bunch of stuff for that. And outside of that, it was really pretty much just Star Trek. I have restarted Law and Order, the original Law and Order, which started up in the 90s. It started with me kind of just watching, Pluto or Roku Live TV or whatever, and just being like, let's tune into some Law and Order. It's been a while since I watched that. The 90s, the 90s version of it starts kind of crazy. It's a whole different cast for the most part. There's a few characters that kind of stuck around throughout the entire show, but it's a whole different cast. And it starts in a grittier New York than we see in later Law and Order, and that's true to the time from the 90s until that show. Well, the show is still going on depending on what version of Law and Order you're watching. But it's been interesting to go back and revisit that kind of procedural crime drama from the beginning. I've never done that with any of the Law and Orders, but it's one that you can throw on and kind of listen to. I like shows like that, especially if I'm like working or doing something different that's I don't have to stare at the TV, because you're going to get the entire story through the detective talking to the suspects or reviewing the crime scene, and then you get the, obviously the law, the order part, the justice part, where they go into the court and they explain the entire case again. So it's kind of one you could tune in and out of and still enjoy. And it's not as great. But coming out of, we'll shift gears a little bit and talk about some video game news. We're going from the mythic past of hockey to the very real headlines in gaming right now, I guess. But first up, we got Roblox. We got some Roblox news. It's one of the biggest platforms in the world with tens of millions of active players every day. It's a space where creativity and community kind of meet, and kids make games and play games and build little economies of their own, for those out there unaware of what Roblox is. But recently, Roblox has been under fire again, this time for more concerns about child safety. It's something that they face criticism on for years at this point. But yeah, the company's been facing waves of criticism over inappropriate content, questionable moderation, and the exposure of young players to predatory behavior. Some of these issues date back years, but they've resurfaced because they point to something structural. When your user base is overwhelmingly young and your content is community driven, you're kind of always walking like this tightrope of what you can do and how much control you can take care of that. They've improved some of the moderation. It's what Roblox is claiming, using some AI scanning tools and reporting tools, and they say that much of the negative press is based on old incidents. But for parents of children still playing the game, that's not very much comfort. There seems to be growing tension between the platform's vision, a metaverse where everyone can create and have this reality of managing millions of creators, and everyone can create in this metaverse and create games and build content, and to some extent they're actually even building in some cases they're building content and selling it at very young ages. And the reality of managing millions of creators, some barely in their teens, it raises the question: when does freedom of creation start conflicting with safety? And who's responsible for drawing that line? Is it the company? Is it the players? Is it the parents? Is it the government? And that's something that Roblox is struggling with. Roblox's struggle is a preview of what the next generation of online gaming and online spaces are going to deal with in general. I think it's very interesting to see this come back up into the news headlines, because it's something that seemed like it was a little squashed after a few years, but it's right back. So it's if you haven't read anything about it, I recommend going check it out. There's several articles out there right now. There's some more lawsuits that have popped up recently related to child safety and some children getting taken advantage of, and a lot of it is kind of what we're facing across all media, right? All social media, and how that stuff is developed, and free-to-play games, and how do you control that kind of community that's that large. And there's a lot of scary things involved in that, and Roblox being one of the biggest. Roblox and Minecraft, especially from the younger side as far as kids go, it's something that I guess people need to keep in mind. It's one of the articles I came across, so I just wanted to bring it up on the show. Meanwhile, across the world in India, got a very different kind of game story unfolding. The Indian government recently introduced the promotion and regulation of online gaming app. It's a massive shift in how games are defined and managed in one of the fastest growing digital markets in the world. Basically, the law recognizes esports as a sport, which is a huge win for competitive gamers, but it also bans most forms of real money gaming. So that means big apps built around fantasy sports, poker, mobile rummy, it's pretty much $1 billion industry, have to shut down or radically change. The government's reasoning is that gambling and gaming need clear separation, but the reaction has been mixed. For professional esports teams and game developers, it's a step towards legitimacy. For companies built around real money games, it's a crisis. And for gamers, it's confusing because the same app could be legal in one state and banned in another. But what's fascinating about India's approach is that it's redefining what gaming means at a national level. For years, countries have struggled to categorize gaming as entertainment, sport, or something else entirely. India's move may end up being a blueprint for how emerging markets handle it. So, two different stories, two different continents, same core idea: how we define gaming, who gets control of it. It still matters. Whether it's Roblox trying to protect its players or a government trying to protect its citizens, gaming reflecting something bigger, our relationship with freedoms, rules, and responsibility. And, playing off that a little bit here, it's something you got to keep in mind, especially with a lot of these free-to-play loot box gaming games, how those will be affected, because in a sense it is a form of gambling. There's already been things like that announced previously, and different governments have had problems with games like Overwatch or CSGO or Fortnite, even for that matter, where, even if you have a clear cut, this is your odds to get this, you having loot boxes in your games on a free-to-play game is a sense of gambling and a way to get money out of the players. While that's not the same thing that's going what India is talking about, where you're talking about specific gaming apps like casino gaming or fantasy sports betting, those kind of things, and the clear separation of those, it is something to keep in mind as we move down the road here, and very interesting to think about. So let's step out of the headlines and into the headlines, the news headlines, and into some gaming history here. It's 1998. The PlayStation's in its prime. The gaming world is moving from the arcade feel of the 90s into something cinematic. And a man who we talked about on the last episode, named Hideo Kojima, is about to release a game that changes everything. Metal Gear Solid. At first glance, it's an action game. Stealth soldiers, secret missions. But underneath that, it's a layered story about war, identity, and technology. It's a game that makes you question not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. You play as Solid Snake, a retired special ops soldier called back into duty. His mission, simple: infiltrate a nuclear disposal facility on Shadow Moses Island, rescue the hostages, and stop a terrorist unit, Foxhound, from launching a nuclear strike using a bipedal tank called Metal Gear Rex. That's the setup, but what happens next is part spy thriller, part psychological drama. Snake discovers Foxhound's leader is his genetic twin. The story dives into cloning, the ethics of warfare, and the manipulation of soldiers by the governments and corporations. For 1998, this was it was wild. You had big cinematic cutscenes, voice acting, long monologues about nuclear proliferation, all wrapped in stealth gameplay that punished impatience and rewarded creativity. Some of what made Metal Gear Solid revolutionary wasn't just its story, it was the way the story and gameplay talked to each other. Like, for instance, you didn't just fight enemies, you understood them. Each boss represented a different psychological scar of war. Psycho Mantis broke the fourth wall and read your memory card. Sniper Wolf wasn't just a villain, she was a tragic soldier who couldn't escape the battlefield. Even Revolver Ocelot's flare felt like a window into something deeper, how style and violence intertwined. Kojima didn't just make a game, he made an argument. The games could be cinematic, political, emotional, and weird all at once. Critics called it a movie you could play, but the truth is, it was more than that. It was one of the first games to make players feel empathy during combat. It didn't just ask you to win, it asked you to think. Metal Gear Solid went on to influence everything from Splinter Cell to The Last of Us. It proved that a game could have the depth of a film and the soul of a novel. And even today, its DNA is everywhere. Every stealth mechanic, every Codec call, every twist that makes you pause and reflect, it all traces back to this. When you think about its lasting impact, Metal Gear Solid did for storytelling in games what Star Wars and Star Trek did for sci-fi. It opened a door, and the entire industry walked through it. So from the myth of a hockey curse to the modern challenges of gaming culture, and finally to a game that turned pixels into philosophy, that's the through line today. It's all about control, the things we try to control, the things we can't, and the stories we tell to make sense of it all. That's all for this episode of the Patton Report. If you enjoyed it, follow the show, share it with a friend, and let me know which game, story, or moment changed your view of what gaming or storytelling can be. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and remember, the best is yet to come.